At Fever Tree, we think whether it's a gin and tonic, a delicious mule, or a sparkling Paloma, if 3/4 of your drink is the mixer, shouldn't it be made with the finest ingredients, mixed with the best? Fever Tree.
What is happening, Post Shifters? Welcome back to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. I've sort of slid this podcast episode or this live stream podcast episode into the mix because originally I had our guest today, Robert Simonson, on my list of people I wanted to have on the show. But he's got something very cool coming up in New York City in a number of weeks. And I was looking at my schedule of things going live and I was like, crap, if I don't have him on the show like this week, by the time it plays out, it's going to be too late. And then we'll be doing a post roundup of what Martini Expo is. Martini Expo is the very first Martini show, I believe, in the globe. We'll get into that with a little bit with Robert Simonson when he comes on. He's written more books than I think anybody else on the topic of cocktails over the last 2 decades. And he is a massively influential journalist that if you have read anything about the daiquiri, the martini, the Manhattan, the Old Fashioned, the Sazerac, any classic cocktail, chances are you've read an article and didn't know about it from Robert Simonson. So welcome, Robert. Thank you so much for being on the show.
It's my pleasure. Nice to be here.
So you've been chronicling drinks and bars for decades now. What's been the biggest shift since you sort of started writing about this? Because while 20 years doesn't seem long for us, it is long for like the next generation of bartenders who are 21, 22, 23. You start talking about 20 years ago and they're like, oh yeah, okay, old timer. What's been the biggest shift of how cocktail culture has been covered in the media for you?
Well, I think the biggest shift is undeniably the pandemic. It changed everything. First of all, everyone was at home, sheltering at home, and everyone had to, they couldn't go to bars, so they had to learn how to make cocktails themselves. And they were all rather spoiled. You know, at that point, you could go anywhere and have a wonderful cocktail, craft cocktail, any city that you were in. But so they didn't have to make cocktails at home, but now they did. And so they became rather skilled. They kind of stuck to the simple ones, the classics. They rediscovered the classics. And also a lot of people left the industry. This is a very difficult industry, particularly during COVID. So a lot of bartenders left. Also, more importantly, a lot of managers left, you know, the people that kind of shaped the bars. And so when we came out at the other end of the tunnel, there were a lot of bars that we had lost, but there were a lot of suddenly new bars, many new bars, but with new players. And some of them knew the old skills and the old drinks, but pretty much a lot of them were working with a blank slate, and they were doing things slightly differently. I think people wanted things simpler. They weren't as interested as before the pandemic and like getting all geeky with it and talking about the cocktails and talking about the history and all that stuff. They mainly wanted to have a good time, and you couldn't blame them because they had just had a very bad time. And so one of the things that actually came out of this was a new fascination and appreciation of the martini, one of the most classic of cocktails and one of the simplest of cocktails. And suddenly you saw martinis everywhere, and you didn't really see that before the pandemic.
Yeah, I was just saying in the green room, I've been doing this almost 30 years, and the martini's always been prolific for myself, but I haven't seen such a crazy resurgence in the last like 3 to 4 years as I have recently. And as I mentioned, like most of my guests, when I say, hey, what's your favorite cocktail drink? Everybody's like, oh, 50-50 martini, or a martini this way, or martini with this garnish. So it's kind of interesting even how like the older stalwarts are going back to the martini.
Yes. I mean, I think it's probably, arguably, you could argue that it's more popular than ever because all generations are drinking it at this point. You know, the older generations who already knew it and the newer generations who are coming to it. And it's quickly proliferated. I mean, it's not just classic martinis. There are plenty of dirty martinis, martini variations. A lot of bars feel they have to have their own signature martini or else the audience is not going to be happy. They may lose some business if they don't have their own special one that is going to make you come out there and try it. So it's been a very interesting period.
So let's take it back a little bit. How did you get into the drinks writing business in the very beginning?
I used to be a theater writer. I did that for 20 years, and I got a little burnt out on that. It's a very small world. And I was looking to do something very different. I wanted to change my beat. And that's not really something that happens in journalism quite a bit. They don't really let you change your beat. But I was determined. And it was 2006. I went down to Tales of the Cocktail. I realized that something was fermenting, something was on the horizon. There were a lot of people getting very excited about mixed drinks and cocktails. And I was always fascinated by that subject. I grew up in Wisconsin, and my mother and father honored the cocktail hour every day at 5 o'clock. And Wisconsin is a state that never forgot how to drink, still hasn't forgotten how to drink. And so I thought, well, I love history, I love ritual. It's really not that different from theater in a way. The bartenders are actors, and the classic cocktails are plays that get revived and revived again. So I got in on the ground floor. I was lucky that way. There weren't that many people writing about it. And I went to my editors. It took a couple of years, but I finally convinced them to let me write about cocktails instead of theater.
I do like that analogy that classic cocktails are just plays that have just been rewritten and rewritten and rewritten and
Yeah, like the Martini is Hamlet. We never get tired of seeing it. Like, how's this bar going to interpret Hamlet?
That's awesome. So with drink journalism being a very niche thing, and I think it's still, for the really great drinks journalists out there, it's still a very necessary in the world of AI and everything else, bloggers and so on and so forth. What responsibility do you think writers like yourself have in shaping the way the public perceives the cocktail culture that's sort of evolving now?
Right now?
Yeah.
Things have changed quite a bit. You mentioned AI, and that is having an incredible effect on my industry, as it is on many industries. The cocktail revival began, when it began, everybody was a bookworm. Not just people like me, but people like you and bartenders. They were all digging through all the old books, and everybody was well read. They had all that knowledge, and that's where they got it, because they couldn't get it anywhere else. And now we're 20 years later, there's lots of information on the internet, and some of it's good and some of it's misinformation. And it's really hard to disseminate at this point. And also mainstream media has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. The people that I write for, some of them don't exist anymore. And the ones that do exist, they have less call for articles. So we're in a very dicey time, I would say, right now. I mean, I think a lot of people get their cocktail information from social media and TikTok, and that's not always a good thing.
So how do you see yourself sort of balancing that out with trying to get, because I think recently you did an article on just the daiquiri, and it was all about the sugar that goes into a daiquiri, and that was
in the Wall Street Journal. Yes,
yeah, that was a fantastic article.
Thank you.
How are you balancing out that element? Do you feel like it's an adaptive thing, or are you more, I'm going to keep going with the direction I'm taking when it comes to drinks journalism, and the people that do follow you will follow you and support you, or are you sort of shifting towards this sort of social media? I call it tidbit media, where it's it's not really an article deep. It's like a little bit, 12 seconds of.
Yeah. I'm sort of decided to continue doing as I have been doing. I sort of feel, I mean, I could try to adapt more, but I'm not going to do TikTok as well as, the 27-year-old. So why should I? They don't really need me. I think I'm more needed as kind of a standard bearer, of the old guard and doing things the old way. I have a Substack that I started 4 years ago called The Mix. And I sort of feel like the history of the cocktail revival is slowly being forgotten a little bit, and it's my job to make sure people do not forget it. And so I've just put that on my shoulders, and I figure that's my job, and it's a job that I happily do.
Have you seen a resurgence in blog style Substack subscriptions? Because I've seen a lot more Substack coming out in my sort of general feed, drinks and stuff. Are you starting to see more people going, okay, I'm done with the tidbit media, I need more in-depth stuff?
Yes, there has been more and more. I started mine with my wife, Mary Kate Murray, who's like the general manager and also contributes in writing. We started it in January 2022. And that was like, as we were getting out of the pandemic, I realized during the pandemic that counting on mainstream media was not a formula for success anymore, because all of my editors kind of ran for the hills, you know, and I had no work there for a while. And so I figured if I'm going to continue doing this kind of stuff, I'm going to have to rely on myself. And so I started it, and I think there was like one other cocktail Substack at that point. And I think a lot of people kind of gave me the side eye at that point, and they wondered what the hell I was doing. I mean, I wrote for the New York Times. Why did I have a Substack? Why was I noodling around with this platform? But since then, as you have mentioned, there are many, many more. I think every single one of my major cocktail writing colleagues has a Substack at this point.
Yeah. So you're seeing more people subscribe to your Substack and absorb the more long form media again?
Yeah, it's a core audience. It's a core audience, but they are a very devoted audience. We have wonderful subscribers at the Mix. I mean, they really are involved, and we get together every now and then. We have an annual cocktail party, and we get to put faces to names and things like that.
So you've written about so many classic cocktails, and some of your classic cocktail books are the most prolific written books on the subject, like Old Fashions, Manhattans, Daiquiris. And what was the driving force behind the Martini becoming like a Martini Expo in New York?
Yes. So I wrote a book on the Martini back in 2019. I think I wrote that book too early. I think the Martini hadn't exploded yet. I could see the seeds, you know, that it was coming back. I don't think that cocktail bartenders paid a lot of attention to the Martini in the early days of the cocktail revival, because it, you know, was strong and hearty, and it did not need saving, you know, like whatever, the Sazerac or the Last Word or something like that. It was fine. And also they were kind of mad at it because of all those teenies in the 90s, you know, which gave cocktails a bad name. But then, you know, you can't ignore the Martini for very long. And so they started making them again. But then it was really COVID that kicked the Martini into high gear. So anyway, we have this Substack, and we're always brainstorming on how to make it better, how to expand it, how to expand its audience. And we were actually, this is my wife and I, Mary Kate, we were having martinis back in March. And we were thinking of story ideas. And I don't know who got the idea, her or me, but somebody commented on how there had never been a convention about the Martini, and there should be, because it could support a convention. It's such a big topic. It's the only cocktail that people have been arguing endlessly about for more than a century. And normally we would go, well, yeah, that's a great idea. Maybe somebody should do that. And then we thought, well, you know, why are we always kicking this can down the road? Why don't we actually try to do it? I mean, I've been to enough conventions. I know what they look like. I know the people who run them and how it goes. So we decided to do it. My first call was to the guy who runs Industry City, which is this big complex of buildings in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. That's where BCB is every year. And I told him the idea. Well, here's the key. The key. Every one of the early calls I made sure they were a Martini lover. Otherwise, they would not understand. And the guy, Jim Somoza, who runs Industry City, loves martinis. So he understood immediately. And he said, yes, we want to do it here. And I think my second call was to Simon Ford, who you know and runs Ford's Gin. And there is no gin brand that's more serious about the Martini than Ford's Gin. And I talked to him on the phone, and he saw the value of such an event. And I called a couple other brands that I knew would be interested. And then after that, I called this woman named Claire Burton Lang. She owns an events production group, and she produced the Spirited Awards down at Tales for the longest time. So obviously, Mary Kate and I were novices. I am a writer, and I don't know how to do these things, but Claire does. And so we joined forces, and I've been doing nothing else since then. All I do is Martini Expo.
That is cool. And Claire's an absolute powerhouse too. She's an amazing event planner. But yeah, it's one of those things. Is like when I started in the industry, again, it came down to books. It wasn't the internet. It was like one of those, like, a martini is the easiest thing to fuck up, but the hardest thing to perfect. And I think still stays true to this day that, like, there's so many different variations of the martini out there. Like, some people like 50/50. You see a tuxedo with sherry in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the coolest thing that came out of the pandemic that a lot of bars sort of adapted to was the freezer door martini. And
Yes.
I love a good freezer door martini, and I always usually have one on my menu because it's just the easiest way to have a perfect martini every time.
Right.
How many people are you gonna have at the Martini Expo, like, showcasing their martini? Because I've seen a couple of pictures, like, Phil Ward's gonna be there, which I don't even know how you got Phil out of retirement to do the Martini Expo, but how many people are gonna be showcasing their martinis?
Well, quite a few. I mean, so we have this thing, which is the finale to the day. It's on September 13th, and it's called the Martini Mixer, and we have what we call the Martini Masters. So we've invited about 12 bartenders who are well known with their skills with the martini. So you mentioned Phil Ward. Martinis have been his obsession for like the past 8 years, I'd say. He's off agave, apparently. And we have Dale DeGroff. Of course, he's going to make a good martini. Julie Reiner, who owns Clover Club and Milady's and invented the gin blossom. She's going to be making gin blossoms.
Nice.
William Elliott from Maison Premier. They have a very famous martini. Sarah Morrissey at Le Veau d'Or. I don't know if you've been there, but they have a famous house martini, which made a name for itself in a very short time. We have Katie Renshaw coming from Hawksmoor in Chicago. Hawksmoor obviously is known for martinis, and Jeff Bell and several others. Masa from Katana Kitten. So that's part of it. But then we also have about 20 sponsors. So obviously this is a martini event. So the sponsors are somewhat laser focused. So we have gin sponsors, vodka sponsors, vermouth sponsors. That's it. We do have one olive sponsor, which I find delightful and funny. I wish I had more olive sponsors. I think that's funny. Obviously, there's no lemon sponsor because who sells lemons? You know, I mean, you just buy them at the grocer. And we have one. We let in one sake sponsor because you see sake in a lot of martinis these days. And there's one liqueur sponsor. So, but they're all going to be serving martinis. So they're all going to have their own little variation, but it will be recognizably a martini. We're not going to really have espresso martinis or chocolatinis or appletinis or anything like this. These are going to be martinis or ever so slightly variations on martinis. And they're all going to be small. We're responsible. These are small little samples. So if there are fools who come to this thing and want to try every single one of them, you know, hopefully they'll be okay. And we'll have tons of food there: hamburgers, hot dogs, oysters, all kinds of things.
So it's going to go over 2 days?
Yeah, it's really 1.5 days. There's a kickoff dinner on Friday night, the 12th, at Confidant, which is the first fine dining restaurant in Industry City. And they actually have a very good house martini, which uses Ford's gin. First time I had it, I thought, well, this is one of the best martinis in the city. It's like, you know, they hit it out of the park. So they're very excited. So if you go to that dinner, you get a 4-course meal and 3 martini pairings.
Oh, wow.
And that's going to be my favorite part of the whole thing because I have to do the least. I just show up, I make a speech, I sit down, I eat, I drink. Confidant does the rest.
Fantastic. So in your eyes, now that you've traveled around, you've written about the martini in for a book as well as like articles and stuff, what in your eyes makes up a good house martini for, as you were saying, like you're bringing in these guest bartenders from these famous bars that have these very famous house martinis. What do you think is the makeup of a great house martini?
Well, I think it should hew pretty close to the classic. I don't mind variation, you know. And by variation, you know, it usually means additional ingredients. But the additional ingredients, be they sherry or a sake or whatever you're going to slip in there, it's like a 1/4 ounce, you know, an eighth. You know, they're almost grace notes. They're accents. but you're still to think, I'm drinking a martini. Um, it has to be very, very cold. I just cannot stand anything that's short of ice cold. I mean, that's a martini really fails if it's not cold enough. And I do like a pretty presentation. I think the martini is a classy cocktail, and so you should have a very nice glass. Maybe you're going to have a little sidecar. Maybe there's a sidecar with like garnishes you can choose from and things like that. Something to just make it look a little bit special.
Nice. So you've been writing about bartenders and bars and cocktails for decades. What is that one common thread in stories that really sticks with you when you walk into a bar and you're like, this is going to be a special space if it's just newly opened, or if it's something that's been open for a while, like it sticks with you why it's been open for so long and been so successful?
So this is a bar that's been open a while.
It's up to you. Like, what's that little je ne sais quoi that you, when you walk into bars, that you're like, this is going to be a successful bar, or if it's been open for a while, it's the reason why it's successful. What's that one thing that when you walk into the bar, that electricity?
Well, the design certainly helps, the decor, and that could be anything. You know, if you're deciding you're a very elegant bar, or if you're deciding you're a corner bar, or even a faux dive bar, if you get that aesthetic right, you know, lighting's very important. I think lighting can kill a bar. I mean, one of the great things about bars is, I mean, everyone's supposed to look good. You're supposed to look good. And if you got a bar where everyone's looking bad, I mean, that's not good. That doesn't help your day. That doesn't, take the edge off. It was great to have acknowledgement within a couple minutes, and that doesn't necessarily it doesn't need to mean that you got your order taken immediately. Just that that eye contact with the bartender, and you put a napkin in front of you and a menu. Then you're feeling like, okay, well, they know I'm here. I've been seen. So there's that. Music is good. I prefer not too loud, but not too some music. Yeah. So it's a lot of little things, and I think you know what I mean. That sometimes it's a bit mysterious when all of the elements coalesce, and it's coalescing. You can't quite put your finger on it, and some of it may be accidental. I mean, some of the best bars that I know, that I love, I know that a lot of it's accidental. They just got lucky.
I call it subconscious conformity. Like we walk in out of a chaotic world outside, and you walk into a bar, and for some reason the forks and the knives are the right way, the napkin gets put down the right way, cocktail gets put down the right way, and it's this sort of subconscious conformity that as a human, our brain sort of goes, oh, I'm relaxed now. The chaos
Yeah.
is not so bad because I'm sitting here and everything is perfect. And I also have massive OCD when it comes to like making sure that everything's perfect.
I also like a quirk or two. I mean, that's a good way you can tell that a bar has a personality. It has a soul. It has a real owner, as opposed to like a corporate shell. And if there's just like one or two or three things about the menu or about the decor, it's like, what the hell's that? Why'd they do that? Because they wanted to. That will stick with you.
So we were talking earlier and in the green room about like I feel like there's this 3 generational gap in the 30 years I've been in the industry. The early days when it was all about books, that's how we had to learn everything very in depth. Like we followed yourself and the Dale DeGroffs and the David Wondriches. Then there was the pre-pandemic where we were really starting to amp up to this beautiful like cocktail renaissance bubble. And then post-pandemic, where we got, as you said, a lot of managers left, a lot of the middle ground industry that were our conduits from the old generation into the younger generation left the industry. So now we're stuck with this younger generation. Not stuck. We've got this younger generation post-pandemic. I call them pandemic baby bartenders, the ones that really got into bartending because they were doing it at home and were like fell in love with it. Pandemic finished, get a job as a bartender. How do we reconnect this next generation that are coming up back to that classic cocktails, the books, the theories, the information that we had pre-pandemic? How do we connect the younger generation to that?
That's a very good question, and I'm not sure I have the answer. I mean, in the early part of the Renaissance, mentorship was a very big thing. I don't know if we have as much of that anymore. maybe people don't have the time or the patience, but it would be nice to have some of that, because it's got to come from the older bartenders, and the younger bartenders want to have to want to hear it and learn it. I've talked to some older bartenders who have tried to make like the younger generation, like, here are some books, you should go home and read them. And there's a lot of resistance. And they say, I don't want to do that. I want to do my own thing. I understand that. I understand people want to make their own mark and go their own way. But there's a sort of an element of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I would like to see some of the conventions like Tales and BCB bring back some of the more historically oriented seminars.
Yep.
I don't think there are many of those anymore. It used to be like the core of these things. And now a lot of the seminars are mainly business oriented or social oriented, social issues. And that's important too. But please, bring back the history, because history isn't a thing that you teach and then like, oh, we all know it now, we can stop that. You just have to like constantly teach it. I mean, look at what's going on in my country right now. Nobody knows any history.
Yeah.
We need to know our history. And it doesn't matter what line of work you're in. You need to know your history.
Yeah, it's one thing that going to Tales and BCB, and I feel like, even personally, like there's sometimes like I get that I want to go listen to Sean Finch talk about business and someone go talk about culture and social issues, but then I'm like, I also just want to go into a tasting room, a seminar, and listen to Ron Cooper, Steve Olson, and a bunch of agave nerds talk about tequila and mezcal, and just drink a whole bunch of tequila and mezcal and have fun with that.
Yeah, right. Then you realize why you did this in the first place, with the fun part, the fun part of the industry. I mean, if ideally you think history is fun and learning stuff is fun, I do.
So, looking forward, as we've talked about a couple times, you've got your fingers on the pulse when it comes to the industry and culture and the direction it's taking. Where do you see the industry and the culture going worldwide right now over the next 12 months to 5 years, I suppose?
Oh my. People ask me this all the time, and it used to be an easy answer, because there was always one thing that everybody was like hooked into, be it agave or whatever. Now it's sort of like everything all at once. All the menus has a little bit of everything, and maybe too much of certain things. There are certainly a lot of clarified cocktails these days, all over the place. I used to think that was really hard, but I don't think it is anymore, because everybody can do it.
Clarified cocktails on a king cube with the citrus coin.
There you go. They must be good sellers. That must be why they do them. I have no idea. You got a little bit of everything now. You got low ABV drinks, which are great. You got no ABV drinks. That's great too. I'd like to. One of the unfortunate trends is that the prices keep going up. And one of the things I always liked about cocktail cultures and cocktails was it was an affordable luxury. So even the non-rich of us could go in and have 1 or 2 or 3 cocktails and, and sort of feel like a king for a small amount of time. But that's becoming harder and harder. So I'd like those to come down, or at least some people come up with creative ideas to do like happy hours and stuff like that, or maybe pare down their back bars so they cut down on the overhead and they can serve drinks at a lower price, because otherwise the younger generation, which we read newspaper articles these days, they're not drinking as much. They're not going to drink as much if the prices are up there. I'm sure they have many reasons to not drink as much, but I'm sure that's one of them. So there's that. We're lucky that good bars continue to open. The new bars that have opened in New York City in the past 3 or 4 years are as good as any that have opened in the last 30 years. We just really delightful, wonderful bars we have here. I don't know if it's the case out there too. And so there's that. That's what I can think of for now.
Yeah, I think a little bit with cocktail pricing is that I feel anyway is that middle management section that left during the pandemic, because that knowledge also for the business side of things hasn't been passed through. So every new manager's like, well, my boss says that I need to get 18%, 20% liquor costs, so everything has to be at 20%. I'm like, well, not so much. You can do loss leaders and contribution markers and all this sort of different things. And I talk to young managers now, and they're like, "Oh, that makes more sense. There's more of a bell curve than a straight line." I'm like, "Well, that's how we used to cost."
Yes. I think bar food has gotten very good and
Bar
very
food.
creative.
Yeah.
That's been a lot of fun. It still is a great area for independence and individuality. There aren't that many businesses left where somebody like yourself who has a vision and a passion can just open one place and execute that. Thankfully, like, corporations have not really taken over the bar area that much.
There's no money in it.
Maybe that's because they're smart. Maybe that's why they're rich.
So apart from the Martini Expo that's coming up very, very quickly, like we've got 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks.
Yeah. A little over 2 weeks now.
What's your plan for the rest of the year post that? Have we got another Robert Simonson book coming out fairly shortly? What's the next?
Recover from the Martini Expo. That's the plan for the rest of the year. I do have a book coming out. I took a little break. My last book, there was a time there where I was publishing a book every year, and that's not a pace that you can keep up. So there will be a book in fall 2026, and it'll be called Bourbon and Rye Cocktails, and you can guess what that's about.
Lovely.
It's sort of a companion piece to a previous book of mine called Tequila and Mezcal Cocktails. So I'm a cocktail guy. I have a cocktail mind. So even when I'm writing about a spirit, I'm always thinking, how do I put this in a cocktail?
Does the Toronto make the bourbon and rye cocktail? Because the Toronto is a very famous Canadian slash.
It is. It's not in that book, but that's because I put it in my first book, The Old Fashioned. I sort of counted it as a variation on an Old Fashioned.
Yeah, it's one I did a seminar at Taylor's in 2012 and 2015, I think, all about classic Canadian cocktails. And the Toronto.
So you had that, and you had the Caesar. What else did you have?
I did the Caesar. I did the Vancouver cocktail. But the Toronto was the one that was the craziest sort of history that we dug up about, like with Robert Vermeer and the Fernet cocktail, and that little quote underneath the Fernet cocktail from Robert Vermeer.
Oh, yeah.
This cocktail is enjoyed by Canadians from Toronto.
Yeah.
And it was one of those, that cocktail that it wasn't back in the day before the internet, before you could go to ChatGPT and go, "Hey, ChatGPT, what's the history of the Toronto cocktail?" And my buddy had a collection of Cocktail Kingdom reproductions, and he'd been flicking through trying to find all this stuff about the Toronto and about New York and everything else. And he found the pre-David Embry reference in a Robert Vermeer that was like 2 years before David Embry posted it in his book. But it's still one of my favorite cocktails, but I love Fernet.
I have this cocktail app called Modern Classics of the Cocktail Renaissance, and recently I added one. I did not know about this, but somebody alerted me to it. It's called the Blackbird. You know this shot? No. It's supposedly popular in Toronto.
Yes.
It is Wild Turkey 101 with a bar spoon of Amaro Montenegro on top.
Yes. A good friend of mine did a whole podcast series about the Blackbird.
Yeah, so there's that. Is the paper plane still popular in Toronto?
Yes.
I was told it was very popular up there.
The paper plane, the classics have still got their good grounding here. And so you can open a really great cocktail bar here in Canada and have a lot of great cool stuff on the menu. But as you said, like, the pandemic changed the consumer behavior in what they liked. Yeah. And so the classics are still, and you'll still get paper planes, you'll still get last words, you'll still get a lot of that. So
right. Okay.
Yeah, it's great. I'm not going to keep you much longer, so I'm going to give you the regular 5 deep podcast questions that I give to every guest.
All right, let's go.
What is the one lesson or experience that has shaped your perspective the most, and how do you carry that forward in your life?
What is the one what experience?
Lesson or experience that has shaped your perspective the most, and how do you carry that forward in your life? And it can be anything. It doesn't need to be industry related.
That's interesting. You know, this is an industry where a lot of things are happening all the time. There are pop-ups and events and tastings and everything, and it kind of can boggle your mind, like what the hell should I do today? And there's a lot of FOMO and all that. I decided a long time ago to relieve myself of all that anxiety, that I decided that wherever I happened to be at the time, that was the place to be.
Mm. Oh, that's a
And
good.
and this gives me a lot of tranquility. So whatever I am in, whatever bar I'm in, whatever event I'm in, that's the right one. That's where
That's
I should be.
that everybody should listen to that when they do BCB and Tails and Portland Cocktail Week, because FOMO is real.
Yes.
If you could leave one lasting message or piece of wisdom for the world, what would it be and why? Told you they were deep, Robert.
One piece of wisdom to leave. Oh Lord. Clean up as you go.
Clean as you go and mise en place. There you go.
No
Looking
matter what you're doing.
looking back on your journey, what is something you wish you had understood earlier in life?
Okay. Something I'd understood earlier in life. Oh my. Geez, so many things. This could be in any part of my life, any part of life,
Any part of your life.
any part of my life, any part of my life. I don't know. Go early to the bar
That's a good one.
when they open. Exactly when they open.
I do myself, because it's like, if I'm, depending on what mood I'm in, I don't necessarily want to deal with people outside the bartender. So
No, neither do I.
when you first open, when you can relax and chill and maybe read a book or the newspaper.
Yeah, I want to talk to the bartender a little bit. I want to be alone with my thoughts. I want to actually taste and concentrate on the cocktail. And I don't mind people when they start to come in, but then I may make my exit.
How do you define success, and has your definition of it over time changed?
Success is if you enjoy what you're doing. We all want to make money, but that doesn't necessarily lead to happiness. I have enjoyed putting together the Martini Expo, but it makes me realize what it's like to be a businessman and what it's like to deal with corporations on a daily basis. And it also made me realize why I was a freelance journalist to begin with, because I am more suited to that. So the old phrase, do what you like and you never work a day in your life.
What do you hope your legacy will be, and what steps are you taking to build it?
What I hope my legacy will be is that when I'm gone in 50 years, people will go back and look at my books and read them and learn something from this era of cocktail drinking, which is what we did, when we were starting up and we were reading the books from before and after Prohibition. I hope, even if the books go out of print and you can only find them in used bookstores or online, I hope they will continue to be of use.
I'll be that 60-year-old guy looking for first editions of Robert Simonson and then posting on a forum somewhere like we used to back in the day.
Wouldn't that be it? It's like if my books ended up like Red Hook Rye and they actually were expensive, and hard to find on the internet. Only I don't see any of the money, just like the Nell doesn't.
And of course, your favorite cocktail is it the Martini? Is your favorite cocktail to drink? And have you got something that you sort of
It is his present, but it has evolved, and I expect it will evolve again. When I first started in this industry, it was Sazerac, and then for a long while, it was the Old Fashioned, and for the past 7 years, it's been the Martini, but that may not last.
After Martini Expo and you drink all the martinis, like, you know what? I need a bit of a break. I'm going to change up my favorite classic cocktail.
It'd have to be a pretty damn good cocktail, though, to make me change.
So, do you want to give one more plug for the Martini Expo before we go?
Absolutely. So it's on September 12th and 13th at Industry City in Brooklyn. If you want to buy tickets, all you have to do is type in Google Martini Expo. The website will come up with a link for tickets. There are all kinds of different versions of tickets to buy. The bargain is the bundle, which gets you into everything and saves you about $75. And you won't regret it. So go do it.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Robert. I'm really glad. Like, it was literally Sunday. I saw a post. I think you posted something about my Martini Expo, and I was flicking through going, oh, crap. And I looked at my schedule and like, I got to get him in quicker, like sooner rather than later. And I just hit you up on Instagram, and I don't even think you were following me at the time. You're like, done, let's do it. So I really appreciate it.
The things that are best are when you just deal directly with one another and you just decide, no red tape.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, my friend. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Robert. Bye-bye.
All right. So long.
All right, post shifters. That's it for now. Keep your standards high, your spirits neat, and your team tighter than your pork costs. Catch you next week on the Post Shift Podcast.